By Doolittle and Dilley University, where students party hardy and slack off without feeling guilty, located in the heart of most major cities. By the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and for viewers like you, thank you. A film by George Burns, Ken Burns' second cousin. Please don't forget after tonight's presentation to watch an intimate conversation with director George Burns, Ken Burns' second cousin.
We present the evolution of music. In the year 8000 BC, music sounded something like this. In 1789, along came Mozart, and music sounded like this. Then in 1907, along came W.C. Handy, and jazz was born. In 1935, the musical world was rocked by Benny Goodman, the king of swing. And then in 1941, along came Spike Jones. And here he is, the man who set music back 10,000 years, Spike Jones.
Jones is a man whose name has been synonymous with laughter in America for more than a decade. Spike Jones was an American musician and band leader, specializing in spoof arrangements of popular songs and classical music. Ballads receiving the Jones treatment were punctuated with gunshots, whistles, cowbells, and outlandish comedic vocals. Jones and his band, Spike Jones and the City Slickers, recorded from the early 1940s to the mid-1950s. The mere mention of Spike Jones still brings smiles to faces far too young to remember the days when Cocktails for Two and Two Front Teeth topped the record sales charts. People from all walks of life tuned in weekly to Spike's network radio show and flocked to his spectacular live performances. Spike was a man of exceptional self-contradictions, a man who operated for most of his career on the theory that show business was mainly a business, yet increasingly yearned for respect as a serious musician. Spike was a man whose sense of humor off stage, as well as on, endured him to many, but who could become ruthless martinet at the slightest sign of incompetence or disloyalty. Spike was a man whose persistence in maintaining a strenuous performance schedule and a 5-pack-a-day smoking habit eventually reached suicidal proportions. Here are the stories of George Rock, Doodles Weaver, Porter, Red Eagle, Billy Barty, and other partners in laughter, many as colorful as Spike. I've been a Spike Jones fan ever since my dad brought home a 78 of Cocktails for Two when I was 4. Spike's records are still the cornerstone of my syndicated radio show.
What's it like to be given the right to be carefree and gay once again? No longer sinking, respectably drinking like civilized ladies and men. No longer need we fear a charming scene like secluded run that overlooks the avenue with someone sharing a delight. It's a band of cocktails for two as we enjoy a cigarette to some exquisite compliment. Two hands are sure to slide in a serviette with cocktails for two. My head may go reeling, but my heart will be obedient. With intoxicating kisses for the principal ingredient. But till the afternoon at 5, we'll be so glad we're both alive. Then maybe fortune will complete the plan that all began with cocktails for two. So glad we're both alive. Then maybe fortune will complete the plan that all began with cocktails for
Lindley Armstrong Jones, a.k.a. Spike Jones, was born on December 14th, 1911. At 7, he started school in his neighborhood town of El Centro, where his mother was his teacher, principal, and bus driver. Once I came into the classroom, and a great big bully was throwing his weight around. So I let it fly, and I socked him across the room. That night, the bully gave me a licking. And from then on, every time one of the kids got it going over, I got one too, after school. Well, we liked hymns, we liked old songs, and we think Lindley acquired a liking for music from that. We wanted Lindley to be a doctor or a lawyer, anything other than a musician, because we knew show people were just about the lowest form of life. Once I drove him 24 miles over rugged dirt roads to the home of a trombone teacher. He also took piano lessons. Our second floor home was too narrow for a piano, forcing him to switch instruments. A short order cook showed Lindley how to make music using knives, forks, spoons, and even whittled Lindley a pair of drumsticks. On Christmas morning, 1922, days after Lindley's 11th birthday, he got his first drum set. About the same time, a telegrapher nicknamed him Spike because he was as thick as a railroad spike. He also organized his first band, the Jazzbo 4. At 15, leaving his parents behind in Imperial Valley, Spike moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Long Beach, 1 block away from Polytechnic High School, the #1 high school in the United States. Before long, Spike was playing drums in the 85-piece orchestra. Spike drove his neighbors nuts by turning up the radio and playing his drums like mad. He hardly went out with girls who were bigger and more mature. Jones graduated from Poly High in 1929 with a B average. A few years later, his glorious alma mater was leveled to the ground by the devastating Long Beach earthquake of 1933. Spike bounced around from one job to another in the 30s. At the time, people paid little attention to the band, and Spike would often play the xylophone with one of his private parts. On September 7th, 1935, Spike married Patricia Ann Middleton, who was a little like his mother. They lived on hamburgers, cigarettes, and Coca-Cola. In 1937, Jones made a dozen records with the foursome. Regulars on the Kraft Music Hall, with Spike on drums and sand blocks. Proof of Jones' ability in this period is the song, I Ain't Hep to That Step, But I'll Dig It, and Solido Lindo. But the pay wasn't good enough to satisfy the audacious young drummer. Jones then turned his imagination loose, embarking on a campaign to make a name for himself and turn the world on its ear. By the mid-1930s, Spike had acquired a penchant for collecting assorted junk. Automobile horns, anvils, whistles, sirens, wash basins, alarm clocks, etc. He was always on the lookout for odds and ends. The older the better, especially if they made noise. While playing at the Paramount, Spike had ample opportunity to study and borrow from an infinite number of vaudeville acts like Burns and Allen, Eddie Cantor, George Jessel, and his favorite, Jack Benny. Spike was not the sole proprietor of the concept for his band, the City Slickers. But the late Del Porter, who sang with the foursome, was his partner from the onset. Del Porter was the leading force in getting the City Slickers started. It was supposed to have been a partnership until Spike took over and Del was left out in the cold. One hit Del sang was The Sheik of Araby.
I'm the Sheik of Araby. Your love belongs to me. At night when you're asleep, into your tent I'll creep, and the stars that shine above will light our way to love. You'll rule this land with me, the Sheik of Araby.
Porter stayed and remained a major influence until violinist Carl Donald Grayson was brought in to share singing duties. One of Grayson's weird sound effects was the gulp. This was the closest a human can come to swallowing their tongue without being hospitalized. The Gulpmeister took over a lot of vocal duties from Del Porter. Of the 6 gold records Spike Jones made, Carl Grayson sang on 2, including Cocktails for Two, which was number 4 on the charts in 1944, and De Fuhrer's Face, which jumped to number 2 on the charts in 1942.
Ladies and gentlemen, De Fuhrer's Face. And is it red? Because this tune is sweeping the country and everybody's out jeering at him. Okay.
When the Führer says, here's the matter, be higher, higher. And in the Führer's face, not to love the Führer. He's a great disgrace, so be higher, higher. And in the Führer's face,
Beautiful.
when the Goebbels says, be on the Goebbels face, be higher, higher. And in the Goebbels face, when the Goering says, they'll never bomb this place, be higher, higher. And in the Goering face, are we not the Superman? Hey, you're Superman. Yeah, yes, the Superman. Different Superman. Is this Nazi land so good? Would you leave it if you could? Yeah, this Nazi land is good. We would leave it if we could. We bring the world to order. I'll Hitler's world to order. Every one of 4 days will love the Führer's face when we bring to the world disorder. When the Führer says, here's the master, be high, high. And in the Führer's face, not to love the Führer is a great disgrace, so be high, high. And in the Führer's face, when the Führer says, here's the master, be high, high. And in the Führer's face, not to love the Führer is a great disgrace, so be high, high. Right in the Führer's face.
As the Der Fuhrer record climbed the charts, Martin Bloch decided to play the record every half hour and offer free copies to those who purchased war bonds. In 1943, radio shows and record dates kept Spike and the City Slickers busy, but it was never enough for their irrepressible leader. The band was aided by a tap dancer and longtime featured artist named Eileen Carlisle, a hefty soprano who struggled through Glowworm, while Red Ingle did his best to make shambles of the number.
The night falls silently on forest streaming.
When Red Ingalls on the right stepped out from behind his sax, the stage shows became more violent. Red's big number was Chloe.
Hello?
Hello, is that you, darling? I'm so glad I got hold of you because I wanted to tell you about a beautiful dress I saw. I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard and I saw this dress and it would only cost $39.50. So I said to the man, if you let... They had this dress, I would be great. My husband had this dress. Just I mean, it's really treasure.
I think that's my wife. Lois? Where are you, you old bat?
I can't get taken up. What's the matter? You crazy something? I didn't even like that. You were like that before. I'm back now. I'm going to go right home. I'm going to pack up all my bags. I'm going to go to the Gringo Cleaners to pick up my dresses. And it's the last time you'll ever see me. And furthermore, if you think you get away with your man, then you will.
Winstead Doodles Weaver, a young nightclub comedian, was hired to head the laugh department. Doodles was naturally crazy. When President Hoover visited his alma mater for the unveiling of a statue, President Hoover got a surprise when the tarp was removed and Doodles Weaver was cradled in the arms of the statue, barking like a seal. I didn't go into show business to beat out Jack Benny or be another Chaplin. I knew a lot of people in the business, and that was the only way to get in. I didn't join Spike until after the war. Well, I was working in a club called the Bandbox. I'd come out and say, "You know how to milk a mouse? First, you get a small stool." Spike asked me to join him before, but I didn't like vaudeville. I was on the radio with Spike for over 2 years and making only $250 a show. My nightclub acts all fit in. I helped write "I Surrender Dear" and act out the words. The same bunch of guys stayed with him and laughed at everything I did. I was doing the horse race routine before I joined Spike. I made up Professor Feedlebaum. It was from the race. And Feedlebaum. We always picked up the hit numbers of the time, like "My Old Flame."
Flashing back again to my old flame. I've met so many who had fascinating ways, a fascinating gaze in their eyes. Some who took me up to the skies, but their attempts at love were only imitations of my old flame. I can't even think of her name, but I'll never be the same until I discover what became of my old flame.
Spike was serious with his work. He was more serious than he would have been if he was single. Love is one thing that makes a guy serious. Well, I got my fun going to the YMCA. The funniest thing happened in Wichita. 20 or 30 girls in the front row knew the lights would turn off during Hawaiian War Chant. So they put little blinking lights inside their bosoms that would go on and off.
fellow travelers. Today, we shall visit the interesting island of Ulu, which spelled backward is Ulu. See how swiftly the sun races through the sky. Pauses for a moment, then sinks into the ocean. Aha, we see a very...
Take it away, Indianapolis Speedway!
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Doodles Weaver in the press box in Indianapolis. It's a beautiful day for the races out here. The cars are ready to go. They're lined up perfectly. The sun is out, not a cloud in the sky. 200,000 people are waiting for this great event. What a spectacle, what a wonderful spectacle. I'll describe the whole thing you're watching on television now. The boys are coming down here. There's number 14 with Hugh Galler on the inside. They're coming down here. The green flag is waving. The star says, okay, it's going to be a perfect start. And there they go! 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Jack, Queen, King. Hit me again, dealer. I'm in. I'm good. I'm in. Wrong game. Around the first turn, number 10 is in the lead. Number 17, a green car, a blue car, a purple car, an orange car. The first car by the stands is number 10. Here he comes flashing down the straight. Look at him go. Here comes car number 10. Here comes car number 10. Here he goes right now. Car number 9, car number 3, 4, 5, 6. A wreck. Man is skidding around. He's out of control. Up to the fence, down to the fence. I think he's out of control. All his wheels are gone. Yeah, he's out of control. And they're ready to be out here. And here they're coming up to another car. And they're getting ready for the winner now. The checkered flag is out. Here they come, flashing by the winner. It looks like Sam Hanks it is. No, who is it? Here he comes. And there goes the winner!
Like Weaver, Earl Bennett was also working in clubs when Spike added him to the group, renaming him Sir Frederick Gass. Although the belches attributed to Gass were supplied by Rock.
Ump-de-daddly-ump. My name is Sir Frederick Gass, and I guess I'm the happiest guy in the whole world. I want everybody to be happy like me. Do you want me to tell you what makes me so happy? Oh, no? Okay, I will. The other night in my hotel, I had an awful fright. Rump-de-daddly-ump-de-daddly-ump. A lady walking in her sleep came to my room one night. Rump-de-daddly-ump-de-daddly-ump. I said, what do you want with me? You better go away. And just then she awoke and said, where am I? Tell me, pray. But that was just a stall, you see. She wanted me to play. Rump-de-daddly-ump-de-daddly-ump.
The musical deprecation review promised audiences 2 hours worth of sheer lunacy and never failed to deliver. Pint-sized Frankie Little pulled a rope across the stage and reappeared at the other end. Water poured from Dr. Horatio Q. Birdbath's prop horn, giving the audience an impromptu bath. A headless corpse fell from a box seat. Pigs slid down chutes, and snakes sprang from the trombone. Freddie Morgan, at 36, was a show business veteran when he joined the band in 1947. Spike hired the banjo player without realizing he was also a skilled comedian and had an ear for dialects. According to his mother, Freddie was always called to the principal's office for making faces or doing something. I think he was a natural-born idiot. Freddie Morgan was featured in Chinese Mule Train.
Lo che hao Hey, Jul, hola! Una, come on, clippity clap, no, Manda, you go, no, ma, ho, clippity clap, clippity clap, clippity, 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 clippity clap, and along. Onda, no, guna, mona, na, no, ayanda. Ulama, una, tu wanda. Gina, una, gina, no, yapongo, no, yo, mano.
In 1942, Spike's regular trumpet player, Wally Klein, got sick the day of the George Burns show. So they called me and asked if I could do it as a quick sub. Spike was about to leave on a USO tour. I joined when they got back. Spike gave me a 7-year contract for $400 a week. Spike always kept to himself. Of course, he was on a different strata, hobnobbing with movie stars and that set. Just about all of them were heavy drinkers. Well, it was tough because we played the first show around noon, and they would come in still pretty well drunk, but always capable of doing their job. Spike didn't want to be funny, but be a businessman, make money. He surrounded himself with talent.
We used to have poker games all night long in the men's room of SJ1, one of the Pullmans we had. Doodles Weaver would always be drunk. Frankie Little said Doodles was throwing money away, so Doodles went and flushed a $10 bill down the toilet. I also sang Spike's #1 hit in 1948, All I Want for Christmas Are My Two Front Teeth.
For Christmas is my two front teeth. My two front teeth. See my two front teeth. If I could only have my two front teeth, then I would wish you Merry Christmas. Yes, they were so long since I could say Sister Susie sitting on the thistle. I'm so gee, how happy I'd be if I could only whistle.
Spike and the City Slickers were not the first to use funny sound effects, but there's little argument today that they employed unusual instruments with more spectacular results than any band since.
For the years have come, and the years have gone, but the oft-told tale is not true. For of all the things the Danube is not blue.
In 1946, Spike told the press, "I'm fed and gorged, stuffed and bloated, with being called the King of Corn. It takes crack musicianship to be a city slicker. Maybe my new band will change the minds of a lot of morons who vote for us in Downbeat's poll year after year. Flight of the Bumblebee crashed on takeoff and reborn as the Jones Laughing Record. From 1942 to 1944, Spike and the City Slickers appeared on a radio show called The Bob Burns Show, a comedy variety show built around Burns' philosophical hillbilly image. The cowbells fit right in. The program was broadcast live on the East Coast and a later show for the West. They played songs like Never Hit Your Grandma with a Shovel.
Oh, never hit your grandma with a shovel. It makes a bad impression on her mind, In a better way impart all the love things in your heart, for it's possible she may retort in kind. Remember, Granny's known you since a baby, and even though infant would prove a shock, so respect her aged head, stay the shovel, and instead paste your dear old sweet old grandma with a rock.
In 1949, Spike had a love affair with San Francisco. The recent birth of Spike Jr. was one. His burp sounds just like a cello. A series of 39 television shows were planned, but only 2 were filmed during the summer of 1950. NBC signed him in 1951 to debut on the Colgate Comedy Hour. One time the revolving stage got stuck. The master electrician ran to the switchboard and dropped dead of a heart attack on the switches. In New York City, there's a law: you can't move the corpse until the coroner has examined the body. So in the middle of the sketch, cops, priests, and everyone else were concerned about a man dying. The City Slickers' potential was never tapped by the little screen. Spike was light years ahead of himself and even had ideas for game shows that went on the air 10 years later. I played drums for Spike Jones and the City Slickers my entire life. That was my meat, my niche in life. Some guys wanted to play with Tommy Dorsey. I wanted to play with Spike Jones. I did songs like The Sound Effects Man, with 3 of us doing sound effects. I wore a football helmet with a gong. I'd shake my head and the gong would sound.
I'd also flop my ears. Castanets would play. Then I'd blow a train whistle and smoke would come out of both ears. I'd also have a bulb under my arm for water coming out of my ears. Well, with a kazoo, I'd play Bye Bye Blues and keep going faster and faster and faster, going crazy until two guys in white coats would come and drag me off the stage.
Crime doesn't pay. Benny's old Maxwell chugging right along.
One night,
That's the sound effects man. When Kay Kaiser gets the
One night, I tried to saw the drumsticks in half that would break when Spike played the drums. You know, the City Slickers, they were like family, even between tours. For 6 years, I spent more time with Roger Donnelly than I did with my wife.
Look out! Well, I guess he must have cleaned out the closet.
Billy Barty joined Jones in 1952. Billy played drums, sang, danced, and did impressions of Liberace, Louis Armstrong, Jimmy Durante, and even Elvis Presley. Billy started out earning $200 a week, but eventually made $650 a week, more than twice as much as most of the Slickers. Barty once faked he was drowning in a Las Vegas swimming pool to promote the review.
Hold everything. Just run into that old blind man. That old blind magic, it's that old blind magic, wait so wide. I see things on the line. Same old regret when your eyes meet mine. I could stay away, but what could I do? I'm aflame with such a burning desire that only my nose can put out the fire. Said he on the hand of affair. I have my head at home. That they have it. All around like this. Then I said it. I'm rocking it.
Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were only partially responsible for the death of the roadshow business that was the cornerstone of Jones's empire. The unions also shut the door on one-nighters and demanded Spike and others hire a number of stagehands, despite the fact Spike carried his own. Also, Spike's 5-pack-a-day smoking habit was beginning to take its toll. After 2 decades of abuse, Spike's lungs were starved for oxygen. By the time Spike's emphysema was diagnosed in 1960, at the age of 48, he was critically ill, but continued smoking non-stop. One time, his band leader, Spade Cooley, was convicted of murdering his spouse in 1961, and Jones took part
in the rap. A segment of the public misread Spade for Spike. Spike wasn't dead yet, but continued performing in Reno and Las Vegas. No less than 3 album projects got the green light in 1960, harpooning popular songs like Knock Knock, Who's There?
We played a million silly games from bingo to gin rummy, but if you're good at puns on names, you'll find that this one's funny. So when you next have company or folks start dropping in for tea, just say who's there and then prepare to learn a thing or 3. Knock, knock, who's there? Sarah, Sarah who? Sarah doctor in the house. Knock, knock, who's there? Emma, Emma who? Emma gonna have trouble with you. If you know how puns are made, then you know how this...
Spike got additional mileage by sending bosomy June Wilkinson to radio stations offering disc jockeys a free hangnails Hennessy manicure with a 3-foot carpenter saw. Jones was never a picture of health, even in his prime. His color wasn't good, and he often looked like walking death. But Spike refused to kick his 5-pack-a-day habit. Spike would get out of his wheelchair and go on stage. By the time he played Disneyland in 1964, he used an inhaler to make the announcements. Jones died in his sleep on Saturday, May 1st, 1965 at 3:15 a.m. He was found by his nurse. Dr. Schwartz determined the immediate cause of death was an excess of carbon dioxide in the lungs and respiratory insufficiency.
Good morning, Mr. Jones. This is Nurse Martha. Time for your 3:15 medicine. Come on, Mr. Jones. This is no time for funny games. Come on, sir. Oh my God! That 5-pack-a-day smoking habit just killed a comedic icon.
Spike Jones was one of the most enigmatic personalities of his time. Beneath the larger-than-life public persona was a complicated, little understood man. His love of classical music and legitimate theater were kept carefully under wraps, as were his often sour disposition, his blistering sarcasm, and his ribald humor. He took great pride to hide the truth and said, "If the real me were ever known, my entire image would be shot."
This is my New Year's resolution. When my mother-in-law begins to yell and shout, through the window I would like to throw her out. But I resolve not to do it, here is why. I'm afraid of hitting someone passing by. This is my New Year's resolution. When I'm at the movies watching a love scene, and the lady's hat is blocking half the screen, I resolve not to shout, "Take off that hat." I'll remove it gently with a baseball bat. This is my New Year's resolution. When I take a lovely lady out to eat, and she orders caviar instead of meat. I resolve to let the lady have her fill, and of course I'll also let her pay the bill. This is my New Year's resolution.
Come on, Sir Frederick Gas. Come on. How about Sir Frederick Gas? Come on, boy. When I'm sitting with my wifey on a bus, and a dear old lady stands in front of us, I resolve to be a gentleman discreet. I'll politely offer her my wifey's seat. This is my New Year's resolution. Hey, Judge Rock, how about your New Year's resolution?
When my mother says, come in, it's time to eat, and I keep on playing games out in the street, I resolve to rush right home now when I'm cold, 'cause my pop just bought a hairbrush and he's bald. This is my New Year's resolution. Hey, Doodles Weaver, how about Professor Beetlebum?
On the radio this year I hope to score with some funny jokes you've never heard before. I resolve not to tell a corny joke. Hello, what's that? The church burned down. Holy smoke. This is my year's root revelation. Hey, Spike! Spike, how about Spike?
In this coming year, I'm going...
Please stay tuned for an exclusive interview with outstanding director George Burns, Ken Burns' second cousin. Good evening. I'm George Burns, unrelated to the old George Burns, but second cousin to the outstanding filmmaker Ken Burns. I consider myself an outstanding maker of films. I'm more of a deep sea diver, going deep. Where my second cousin Ken is more of a talented snorkeler, skimming the surface of trivial things in U.S. history, like the Civil War and a bunch of other bad stuff. Unlike Ken, I absolutely love going deep, which is what I tried doing with Spike Who. Not only describing Spike's incredible career, but Spike's dark side, like smoking 5 packs of cigarettes a day that killed him. I personally never found that in Ken's incredibly long 12-part series on Abraham Lincoln. Hold on. Someone is telling me that Ken never made a 12-part documentary on Abraham Lincoln? Well, that's probably why. People like myself can accept the fact that Abraham Lincoln died of cancer. Hold on. Someone is now telling me that Lincoln got shot. I better double check that. Over the last 10 years in making Spike Who, I often felt that Spike was my best friend. We laughed together, we cried together, and hopefully, if things work out, I'll make a substantial chunk of change if a network like Netflix or HBO decides to pick it up. Some of my earlier projects you may have watched were Stop Stalin, an intimate look at the Russian dictator Joseph Stalin, and most recently, Ain't Nothing Silly About Silly Putty, the interesting but also tragic story of James Wright, the genius who invented Silly Putty. I'm really looking forward to my next project titled Houston, We Seem to Have a Problem, about my close friend Whitney Houston, who, by the way, has been refusing to return my phone calls. Hold on. Holy crap! You've got to be kidding me! Someone keeps reminding me to tell everyone to support your local PBS station, to continue watching quality programming like Spike Who. Brad, were you pulling my leg about Whitney?
Wenn der Führer says, wie ist der Master Race? Wie heil, heil, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace. So wie heil, heil, right in the Führer's face. Wenn Herr Goebbels says, we own the world in space. Wie heil, heil, right in Herr Goebbels' face. Wenn Herr Göring says,